title, but instead I just said argue the right spouse. And you can see that's not nearly as creative as the other title. So hopefully I can maybe change that for the online version. So just to remind you where we were last time, we had talked about how God designs marriage, and then God not only designs it, but he created it in marriages to put God on display, particularly his covenant grace. And we mentioned that the real tragedy of divorce, and the real reason it's so horrific in God's eyes, is that it is a covenant breaking thing, and it misrepresents Christ and the covenant he made with us as Christians to the world. Because Christ made a covenant with us when we invited him into our hearts to be our Savior. He says, I'll never leave you or forsake you. And when we get divorced, what we're doing is leaving and forsaking. And so we're not supposed to do that. And the Bible mentions in Proverbs 2:17, it says, she who forsakes the partner of her youth and has forgotten the covenant of her God. So when you leave your partner, you're forgetting the covenant that you made to that partner. And author Tim Keller says to break faith with your spouse is to break faith with God at the same time. If two Christians are married, part of that relationship is to keep a covenant that you made to God. So when Judy and I got married, we didn't just make a covenant with one another. We made a covenant to God. I made a vow to God to stay faithful to her, and she made a vow to God to stay faithful to me until death do us part. And so when I was summing up the last message, I ended with this phrase, that staying married is not mainly about staying in love. Now that's what we think. We've been taught by watching TV shows and whatnot that the secret to a successful marriage is keeping the romance alive and keeping madly in love with one another. And yet it's what it's really about is it's about keeping covenant. It's about keeping the covenant.